Welcome to episode 9 from MOSIF's APIs over IPAs podcast network. I'm Lawrence Ebringer, your host today, and the Chief Marketing Officer of MOSIF, the API observability platform. Joining me is Claire Barrett, a seasoned consultant in strategy and technology change with long tenures at international consulting companies and financial institutions, and currently the director of APIs First with Mehdi Majawi. Claire's also an active champion for women in technology and the global leader of women in APIs. Claire, welcome to our humble podcast network. Where in the world do we find you?
Thank you, Lawrence, for inviting me. I'm joining you today from the UK.
Great, I know it well. Kicking things off, why don't you share with us your journey to become director at APIs First and the leader of global women in APIs, and perhaps illuminate on what were your drivers along the way?
So my professional background has been in IT leadership and management consulting, almost always with and around large and more complex, mature organizations going through change. My background, I grew up as a child in a military family, so I got to travel quite a lot. I changed schools, neighborhoods, countries during my, if you like, formative years, and it means that I've always been comfortable in new situations. I see it more as an adrenaline rush than a fear. So I've always been drawn to helping people and organizations manage and thrive through change. And build the kind of skills and resilience and cultures that allow them to respond. I've also got a real curiosity about the world. I describe myself as a sort of IT-enabled change polyglot in that I speak the language of strategy, I speak the language of IT for business architecture, project management, agile, scaled agile practices, digital transformation, organizational change, and comms. So to me, these all come together in the API space. And my role at APIs First has aligned also with a move back to Europe from Australia, where I've been for most of my professional career. We help people and organizations realize the full potential of APIs, generally as part of a wider organizational transformation. Joining APIs First also coincided with getting to work with a team around the API Days conferences and their Global Women in APIs initiative. And I've had the privilege of leading that group, which is about building people's confidence and skills with speaking and writing in public.
Great, a very diverse background. And again, thank you for joining us on our podcast network today. So let's talk a little about product management in large organizations. How do you define product management in higher complexity, mature organizations? And how is it different from project management?
So an excellent question that I think a lot of people are wrestling with or thinking about deeply at the moment. Perhaps I could start with how I define project management, or maybe some of the sort of what is it about at its essence. And project management, you could call out 3 key things. It's about achieving a particular sponsor's vision and goal, and project managers typically have quite a close emotional connection with the sponsor's dream and vision. It's secondly about ownership of deliverables and about running processes to execute that change across technology and people and skill sets. And good project managers can own deliverables and run the process to execute, often regardless of which industry or underpinning technologies or types of teams and problems that they're solving. A good project, and the more experienced they are, and the wider the scope of the change that they're used to driving, the more able they are to sort of be able to be dropped into solving complex problems regardless of what the project's trying to achieve, if you like. And the third thing is really about how they organize and do their work. It's about planning the work, and working the plan is a typical mantra. These days, this is about chunking work down into small, manageable pieces, iterating continuously, learning and moving towards a goal. So those are some of the kind of themes around project management. And whereas product management would have a different set of things that are important, that are anchored. So maybe three of the things could be around how they have ownership of the product's life cycle. So they're looking much longer term than necessarily getting to the end of a project and a scope. They're championing the vision for the product. In the API sense, this is about finding new markets, new channels, new business opportunities for creating business value. Secondly, they're very customer centric. Now those customers could be other, in API sense, could be developers in other organizations who may be looking to create models, or they could be focused on products that are being digitized and automated through APIs. The emotional connection of a product manager is more strongly to its customers, to the users of the product. For APIs, this is the potential that other systems will use it via those teams. And the third thing I think that is important for product management is a very data, fact-based evidence element to the decisions that they're making. So the project manager and the product manager both share strong commercial acumen. They need to be able to manage and drive change. They need to be able to move things forward, drive action. They need to influence and communicate across very large and diverse groups of stakeholders. They both have roles in bringing people together who may not necessarily work for them directly. So they've got to be able to operate through influence. But I do think they have a different emphasis and connection. I don't think you can just rebadge a project, a role that looks under the covers a bit like a project manager, because they're just good at organizing things and getting stuff done, and relabel it as a product manager. I think you need to be thinking of product managers as deeply connected to understanding the business subject. They're deep business subject matter experts in the capability that's being offered, and their level of IT understanding in an API sense does need to be perhaps it can't be necessarily agnostic of that technology in the same sense that perhaps project managers are able to operate across more domains.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I always love to slow down in these podcasts when there's an especially cogent moment, analysis or insight. How does product thinking manage the challenge of meeting short-term priorities whilst transforming more broadly? Or put another way, how do you re-engineer a whole plane while it's flying?
So I think this striking these balances is such a real problem for people, particularly in large and mature organizations that are striving to simplify, automate, modernize their existing systems at the same time as trying to find new opportunities which potentially if not well managed, are at risk of, if you like, adding complexity into the environment. So how do they, it's the old walk and chew gum thing. The organizations that are getting the most success in this space are able to right size the levels, their architectures, to be able to focus on particular domains or particular areas of business and technology combined capability, and have the right organizational structure and ownership for it. But it's also a lot about how they fund and manage the ability to prioritize. So as one moves from project-based change to more product-based thinking. Going along with that is the ability to think of long build and run capability as being long running through the life cycle of a product, as distinct from being time bound and scope bound in the traditional project sense. And this certainly plays out in things like, what's OPEX versus CAPEX. It plays out in things about what's business as usual versus what's change. So it can be very, it can go quite heavily to the core of how organizations have traditionally thought of change in order to be able to respond. But they can do experiments and build capability if they've got the right kind of attitude, and they can chunk things down to be small enough rather than try and overthink it too quickly. So it's a lot about building skills and confidence with trying things out and learning from them, and then moving ahead. It's like leveling up each step in a game. As you've leveled up to into the teens and the 20s levels, you can deal with an awful lot more complexity and stuff coming at you all the time from different places, and the prizes are bigger, and you can collaborate with different people than you'd thought of in the past. Early on, you need to build skills and muscles at managing change.
Great. Love that definition. Yes, it's a lot about moving slowly initially, and then building upon as you said, the muscles and the skills that you've built up over time to really formulate large-scale change. What cultural or behavioral levers need to be pulled, and where should you invest to make a product successful across large organizations?
We focus in on API products in particular. They do call for a different way of thinking than APIs as integration components. So I think a lot of people can quickly understand that, or it's not a big stretch in thinking to think of APIs as a better and simpler way of providing hooks between systems and hooks between external parties and organizations. What's a next step of thinking is, how might an API externalized be offered as a product into new channels that don't yet exist, and into new markets, as opposed to re-engineering or offering a new experience. This is offering a product in a new sense to a new market, which feels very different for people. And so a digital savviness is for the sponsoring teams of product ownership is key. Having the right fit for purpose governance in place that underpins and supports those API products and teams around them. So the very clear and easy to understand minimum standards and expectations around security, around usability, around data management. The other, as we were talking about before, this project to product mindset, as well as being understood by multiple different stakeholders in the organization, is key. So it is about building that capability, finding the places that early on that will resonate and that will tell a story that can be bought into by people. So what is the particular opportunity, which early on might not be as maybe as far reaching as once you've leveled up a number of times, then you can kind of be exploring more progressive ways of working. But by then you've sort of built a momentum, and you've got the engineering confidence, you've got the scalability confidence, the performance confidence, the security, the finance, funding arrangements, those pieces that need to be, those capabilities need to be in place.
Great. Yes, I totally see that in our customer base. What do you mean by achieving change stickiness? And what are some of the things people can take away from your research findings into it? And I should probably say that I got the idea from this question from your excellent LinkedIn article on this topic.
Thank you, Lawrence. Transformation, change, stickiness has been an interest in mine in terms of what IT-enabled change leaders. So these are tech-savvy business leaders, CTOs and CIOs, consultants supporting organizations through transformational change, seasoned technologists. What are some of the trade-offs they are encouraging or making that allow them to do this building and repairing the plane while flying it at the same time? The findings have been interesting, and they are actually different depending on the complexity and size of the organization. So there's an appreciation that if you're driving large change and you're looking at it through an IT-enabled change lens, there are ways in which you can be most effective, more or less effective, depending on where you want to put your efforts. Because there's always more things that you can do than you have enough resources, team skills, funding to go after. So how do you choose what to do? How do you choose what to do later or what to not do? At higher complexity organizations, for example, they would put 60% of their effort towards in getting attention for the change that's going on. They put 60% of their effort towards large symbols of new things that are being done. So versus 40% of their effort towards what I call the kind of low-hanging fruit pieces of change. So things that will show that there's some change happening, but they may not be the really, really big long-term impacts. So whereas in lower complexity organizations, that split would be the other way around. It's actually more like they would put 65% of their effort towards things that make a meaningful difference, low-hanging fruit, problems that have been around for a while that by addressing them, they will get trust and confidence from employees and customers close to the coalface of their IT operations, and then support some of the bigger symbols of change. So a big symbol of change could be a major reorganization around perhaps a different kind of scaled agile arrangement. It could be a change in language. I've heard of change in international language for a non-English speaking organization into English, for example, or so something that's kind of going to get people sitting up and listening. Another piece that I ask people about, which I think is very relevant in the API space, which has a very where there's a big, if you like, war for talent at the moment in terms of finding, for example, API product managers. I asked where people would put their efforts and investment in building skills and capability in-house, taking perhaps a bit longer to recruit and retain and build new capability that will drive their transformation, versus what effort would they put into getting externals in to help them with a fast start. And regardless of the size of organization or industry, it was more than 50%, about 55% of their efforts would go to building capability internally, versus nearly half, 45% on external support. So both options are reasonable things to choose, but there was a recognition both by external consultants on the importance of organizations building internal capability, as much as there were the recognition for people trying to build skills in-house about the need to be able to get support from externals.
That's fascinating. I would have never thought that it's 50-50 for building internal capabilities versus bringing it in from outside.
So just to qualify, it's 55% of the effort that they would put towards building internal capability versus they would put 45% of their effort towards getting help from outside in driving in driving a digital change. So people recognize that it's they need that long-term capability in-house. They don't necessarily have the time, or they can't afford at the moment to take the amount of time it will take to build that capability in-house, either reskill existing people with new digital capabilities, or with finding and recruiting those people. They need the external support to give them that head start, with a strong expectation that that role is to coach and support the development of that capability, as opposed to having a long-term third-party reliance on something as core and fundamental as the API space, for example, where that becomes such a if you've got API products that are building out an embedded business model for you, and you see that as part of your future, and the people that are behind supporting that as having the capabilities that you want for the long term, you don't see that as something that you'd outsource.
Right. Yeah, in fact, that's very topical that you said that, because we have a number of new customers in health tech, and it's fascinating. The earlier on the customer is, the more likely they are to have external consultants helping them with HIPAA and high-tech compliance. But then when dealing with larger organizations in health tech that have an established product and are further down the path, practically all of their expertise is internally built and developed. So yeah, we certainly see that in the marketplace today. How does your proposed model of API stakeholders work, where sponsors, transformers, and technologists interact to execute lasting change?
So, Lawrence, the description that we use is these three different communities, if you like, within a lot of organizations today going through transformational change. It's not an organizational hierarchical split. It's more a role between these kind of elders, the sponsors of the organization that are looking to realize the strategies that they've committed to and want to see realized as quickly as they can, if you like, and inevitably, while APIs may not be called out in those strategies, they're certainly inherent in the ability to be able to move faster, be able to explore and participate in new ecosystems and new kinds of models and marketplaces. So there's the elders, the transformers or the explorers, the people who are out there looking for new opportunities. They may be already at a kind of API as product base, or they may be focused on perhaps digitizing existing experiences, reimagining customer journeys. And then the third is the technologists, the kind of navigators of the IT landscape and the tooling and the architectures and the enablers of which APIs are certainly a core. One of the challenges for these groups is not to have them, if you like, standing with their backs to each other, trying to shout into the wind, but singing from a shared song sheet and finding the synergies in the perhaps what can be white space between these teams is really key, because they do have often different starting points, all correctly and appropriately intentioned towards driving this broader change, but not necessarily aligned around the same priorities. So all busy, all focused on the things that are closest to where their function will make the highest impact to the organization more broadly. But that can create tension between which things to work on first. So finding the shared API goals is really critical. And this can often, for us early on in the lower levels, this may be relatively small in terms of its ambition and scope and opportunity. But as organizations level up, it may be across all three. So early on, maybe just 2 of those teams would be working and focusing on something. The APIs that are going to enable processes to be digitized faster. The IT team working on the tooling for that, making sure that those can be secure, managed, self-served internally. That may lead on to some other impacts, but more broadly for other sponsors. But then the transformers may be looking to actually trigger more change in the elders, the sponsors community, to start thinking differently. The IT teams may actually be able to offer new ways of thinking about that hadn't existed before, and creating the right construct for those 3 parties to operate together. Could be around a product, or it could be around a program in order to inform a product. Is to me part of the secret sauce for getting fast impact at each level.
Well, fascinating distinction between those 3 different very important groups. So changing gears a little and moving on to a topic close to my heart, since I have 2 daughters, share with us your experiences of being a leader of women in the APIs community. What are the benefits of greater workplace balance and inclusion for product teams?
So product teams are naturally expected to be creative, to be responsive, to be thinking not just about technical product opportunities, but the empathies and the feelings and the sentiments of their communities, their user bases, etc. And so greater balance in a team will naturally create a more diverse way of looking at problems. And balance is not just gender; it's race and culture and age and orientation and ability. All of those elements will allow people to think up products that are more creative, that are more responsive. Another key thing is that people are more engaged if they feel included, and they have the opportunity to work with, bring their whole selves to work and be connected. So inclusion pays out very heavily in increasing staff engagement. And personally, I think they also are more resilient to change, because people are more open to others and to other ideas, and therefore they tend to be more sensitive to what's going on in the external environment. And certainly research bears out that organizations with greater balance in their leadership teams and greater balance in their boards and directions and so on will respond more successfully to change that's going on. And that couldn't be more real than what's happening in the world today.
Right. That is so true and so cogently put, especially here in the Silicon Valley. We need a whole lot more greater inclusion and diversity in the tech workspace. So on that subject, as the leader of women in the APIs community, what do you suggest that underrepresented people listening to this podcast can do to help further their careers? And specifically, what programs might be available?
We run programs to help people build their confidence and skills with speaking and writing in the public domain. So we feel strongly that people who can showcase the talents of their teams, their colleagues, and by association themselves, are are building the opportunity to be recognized, not just externally, but internally as well. And we feel that as people build confidence with speaking about what they and their teams are doing and how that's making a difference, that encourages perhaps less represented other team members to step up, to contribute. So we support people in their careers, their profiles, by running programs that allow them to practice in a safe space, applying to speak at conferences, for example. We provide them with coaching and support before, during, and after conference participation, increasingly now in writing in public as well, so writing in the public domain. We provide networking events. We provide support profiles of women in the APIs community, which is, I should say, pretty broad. Last year, we increased our membership by 150%. We offered 5 programs. Our members are now from over 23 countries and more than 85 different organizations, and the membership's growing literally by the day. The members come from large organizations with, with API, let's say, architecture roles. They come from API management system vendors. They come from startups. They come from people acting, freelancers in the API space, technical writers, UX. It's like a really fantastically broad group, men and women in our membership, and or men and people identifying as men and women or non-binary in our membership. And yeah, it's been a fantastic way for particularly people who are perhaps a little less connected in this pandemic world that we're in. We've been able to provide connection through this virtual format, which for people in all corners of the world has been, we repeatedly hear, has been a really, really nice and important feeling of, yeah, being part of something perhaps bigger than one is.
Brilliant, brilliant. Where online should people go to find out more information about your excellent programs?
So Women in APIs is at www.apidays.global, and the Women Initiatives, the initiatives page. You can join there. You can find out about the programs. You can contact me on LinkedIn if you want to contact me directly. I could also, in the subject of API product management, as part of a group of global API experts, the API Collective, we're running a productizing APIs bootcamp from the 23rd of March. And you can find out more details on that at www.theapicollective.com.
Great, excellent. Well, we finished on a very instructive and helpful note there, providing a couple of great links for furthering one's career. Thank you very much, Claire, for taking time today to cover such interesting and important topics. We wish you the best and stay safe.
Thank you, Lawrence. It's been an absolute delight to have you here, and look forward to following the continued success of MOSIF.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Claire.